In July 2013, the body of 36-year-old Veronica McAllister was found lifeless in the dining room of her luxurious mansion in Cypress, Texas. An investigation uncovered a web of betrayal, lies, and a deadly affair. In December 2012, during a Christmas charity dinner, an encounter between oil tycoon Fred McAllister, his wife Veronica, and a mall Santa Claus named Randy Jacobs set off a chain of events that would unravel the McAllister family's carefully constructed life, ultimately leading to murder and scandal. On the calm morning of March 6, 2013, Cypress, Texas woke to a shocking tragedy that would grip the entire town. The quiet suburb, known for its manicured lawns and sprawling estates, erupted in chaos when police and emergency responders arrived at the McAllister mansion just after a panicked 911 call had been made. What they discovered inside the grand home painted a horrifying picture. Veronica McAllister, the glamorous wife of oil tycoon Fred McAllister, lay lifeless on the ornate dining room floor. Her blood pooled on the polished wood, seeping into the intricate patterns of the expensive rug beneath her. The large dining table, set for a Christmas feast, remained eerily untouched. Plates perfectly arranged, the turkey partially carved, and candles burned low. The festive decorations, meant to symbolize joy and family unity, now served as a chilling backdrop to her violent death. Fred sat frozen at the head of the table, his face pale, his hands trembling as though they had forgotten how to move. Around him, his twin daughters, Clara and Elise, were crumpled in their seats, their eyes swollen and red from crying. Both girls were just 19, their youthful innocence now forever marred by the memory of their mother's blood spilling before them. A heavy silence consumed the room, broken only by the soft shuffling of police officers as they began their grim task of documenting the scene. The officers noted the absence of one particular guest who, by all accounts, had been present at the dinner earlier that night. The family reluctantly explained that Veronica had invited a man, Randy Jacobs, a local mall Santa Claus. Veronica had framed the invitation as an act of kindness, insisting that Randy was a lonely, down-on-his-luck man who had nowhere to go for the holidays. It was an unusual gesture, even for her, but no one had openly objected at the time. Now, his absence raised troubling questions. By March 8, 2013, the investigation was in full swing. Detectives had spent days speaking to family, friends, and anyone who might know more about what had happened that night. Fred presented himself as a grieving husband, his responses measured but laced with anger and confusion. He claimed no knowledge of any deeper relationship between Veronica and Randy, stating that the invitation was entirely her idea. He portrayed Veronica as a compassionate woman, someone who believed in giving people second chances, even if they didn't deserve them. Detectives found inconsistencies in his recollection of the evening, but nothing concrete enough to point fingers. It was Clara, one of the twins, who added another layer to the mystery. Though hesitant and visibly shaken, she admitted overhearing her parents argue in hushed tones shortly before dinner. She didn't know what it was about, but remembered feeling uneasy about the way her mother's voice trembled, something it rarely did. Friends of the McAllisters painted an equally perplexing picture of Veronica. While many admired her beauty and charm, whispers of her unhappiness had circulated among her social circles for months. To the outside world, Veronica and Fred were the perfect couple, a power duo with immense wealth, influence, and a picture-perfect family. But those closest to her knew that Veronica often felt stifled in her role as a trophy wife. Some spoke of her growing desire to break free from the constraints of her marriage. Yet, no one could have predicted that she had been seeing Randy Jacobs, a man whose life was worlds apart from hers. As the days wore on, the police began piecing together Randy's profile. He was no stranger to hardship. A former rodeo star turned drifter, Randy had taken up the seasonal role of playing Santa Claus to make ends meet. Beneath his jovial exterior was a man with a troubled past, marked by financial instability and a history of volatile relationships. Despite this, many who knew him described him as kind-hearted and loyal to those who showed him respect. Still, there were darker accounts, stories of bar fights, outbursts, and an inability to manage his anger. Randy's connection to Veronica deepened the mystery. Witnesses came forward to say they had seen them together on several occasions, always in places far from Cypress. A diner on the edge of town, a secluded park, motels where Veronica had checked in under a false name. It became clear to investigators that theirs was not a simple friendship. But what had drawn Veronica to Randy? Was it rebellion? Passion? Or something more profound, something rooted in the loneliness that often hides behind wealth and privilege? By March 20th, 2013, the investigation reached a pivotal moment. Detectives reviewing CCTV footage from the night of the murder uncovered a key piece of evidence. Randy's truck, a rusted Ford pickup, was seen leaving the vicinity of the McAllister mansion around 10:30 p.m. The time matched the approximate window during which the murder was believed to have occurred. This revelation painted Randy as more than a missing person. He was now the prime suspect. A deeper dive into Randy's recent actions painted a damning picture. Bank records showed withdrawals in small but frequent amounts, suggesting he was planning to disappear. Witnesses claimed to have seen him buying gas cans and non-perishable supplies at a convenience store. His demeanor agitated and rushed. Every detail pointed to a man on the run. It was in a remote cabin in Oklahoma, 3 states away, that Randy was finally found. The cabin, barely more than a shack, was hidden deep within the woods, accessible only by a narrow dirt road. When law enforcement stormed the property, they found Randy disheveled and visibly exhausted. He didn't resist arrest, but remained eerily silent as he was cuffed and escorted to the waiting squad car. In the corner of the cabin, detectives spotted a photograph of Veronica, her face circled in red marker, tucked under a stack of papers. The discovery raised as many questions as it answered. What had Randy been planning in that secluded cabin? Why did he flee if he wasn't guilty? And, most importantly, what exactly had transpired between him and Veronica on that fateful Christmas night? As Randy was transported back to Texas to face questioning, the tangled web of secrets and lies began to unravel, setting the stage for a trial that would captivate the nation. The story of Veronica McAllister and Randy Jacobs began long before the fateful Christmas dinner of December 24th, 2012, a night that would unravel everything. For years, Veronica had lived a life of luxury and suffocation. She was the wife of Fred McAllister, one of the wealthiest oil tycoons in Texas. And while their marriage looked perfect from the outside, cracks had been forming for years. Fred's wealth brought power and control, and his love for his empire seemed to overshadow any affection he once had for his wife. He was meticulous, cold, and consumed by his business, leaving Veronica to navigate her days alone in the mansion they shared. To outsiders, Veronica was enviable. Her beauty was striking, her wardrobe filled with designer clothes, and her life seemingly free of care. Yet behind the doors of the grand McAllister estate, she felt trapped. Fred's strict routines, his disregard for her feelings, and his constant need to remind her of her dependence on him created a gilded cage she couldn't escape. She filled her time with charity events, fundraisers, and social gatherings, anything that allowed her to feel a sense of purpose outside the shadows of her husband's empire. It was at one of these events, a Christmas charity fundraiser at the Cypress Mall in late December 2012, that Veronica met Randy Jacobs. Randy was everything Fred wasn't. A former rodeo star whose career had been derailed by injuries and bad decisions, he had a rugged charm that seemed out of place among the polished and wealthy attendees. Randy had been hired to play Santa Claus for the mall's holiday festivities, a seasonal gig he took to make ends meet after falling on hard times. His smile was infectious, his laughter hearty and genuine, and Veronica found herself drawn to his unpolished, easygoing demeanor. The connection between them began subtly. During the fundraiser, Veronica spent more time at the Santa booth than necessary, watching as Randy entertained the children. His kindness and humor were magnetic. When the event ended, she found herself lingering near him, exchanging polite conversation that soon felt like more. Randy didn't seem awestruck by her wealth or intimidated by her status, and for the first time in years, Veronica felt truly seen. Over the weeks that followed, their paths crossed again and again. Randy lived a modest life on the outskirts of Cypress, and Veronica, unable to resist the pull she felt toward him, began finding excuses to visit parts of town she would never normally frequent. Their relationship began innocently. They shared coffee at a small diner and spoke about their vastly different lives. Veronica opened up about the loneliness she felt in her marriage, and Randy shared stories of his glory days as a rodeo star and the struggles that followed when his career ended. By the spring of 2012, their connection had deepened into a full-blown affair. They met in motels, their passion burning with an intensity neither had expected. For Veronica, Randy represented freedom, a break from the monotony and control of her life with Fred. For Randy, Veronica was a glimpse of a world he had never known, a world where he was desired not for his looks or skills, but for the man he was beneath the surface. Their love affair was reckless, driven by emotions they could barely control. And yet, it was doomed from the start. As Christmas approached, the cracks in their secret world began to widen. Randy had grown tired of hiding and began pressuring Veronica to leave Fred. Veronica, while enthralled by Randy, felt the weight of what leaving her marriage would mean. She feared Fred's wrath, his influence, and the social fallout that would follow. Still, she found herself unable to resist Randy's demands for more time, more attention, and more commitment. By December 24th, 2012, the affair had reached a boiling point. That morning, Veronica made the shocking decision to invite Randy to the family Christmas dinner. She presented the idea to Fred as an act of charity, insisting that Randy was a lonely man who deserved a place at their table. Fred, though skeptical, agreed. He saw it as an opportunity to project the image of generosity that the McAllister name was built upon, unaware of the true nature of Randy's relationship with his wife. The evening began with an uncomfortable energy. Randy arrived dressed simply, his rough, weathered appearance clashing with the McAllisters' pristine, elegant world. The twins, Clara and Elise, exchanged uneasy glances as Randy sat at the table, his presence starkly out of place among the polished silverware and crystal glasses. Veronica tried to mask her nervousness, but her attempts to act natural only heightened the tension. As the evening progressed, Randy's demeanor shifted. He drank more than he should have, loosening his tongue and making offhand remarks that hinted at his deeper connection to Veronica. Fred, seated at the head of the table, grew increasingly irritated. He was a man accustomed to control, and Randy's rough humor and lack of decorum were beginning to wear on him. The turning point came after dinner, when Randy followed Veronica into the kitchen. What began as a private conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument. Randy, emboldened by alcohol, pressed Veronica about her promises to leave Fred. Veronica, caught between her lover's demands and the reality of her life, tried to de-escalate, but her voice carried a tension she couldn't hide. Snippets of their argument drifted into the dining room, where Fred sat, his irritation turning into suspicion. Unable to ignore what he was hearing, Fred entered the kitchen. What he found there shattered his carefully constructed world. The sight of Randy standing too close to his wife, their conversation laden with a history he hadn't been privy to, ignited a fury he could barely contain. His voice, sharp and accusing, cut through the room as he confronted Veronica. Her attempts to explain only fueled his anger, and Randy, in an ill-advised attempt to defend her, stepped forward. The argument exploded into chaos. Fred's fury turned toward Randy, the interloper who had dared to invade his home and threaten his marriage. Veronica's pleas for calm were drowned out by accusations, each one louder and more damning than the last. The twins, watching from the dining room, were frozen in shock, unable to process the unraveling of their family before their eyes. Randy, realizing he had pushed too far, stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the grand hallways, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Veronica stood in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face, while Fred remained rooted in place, his chest heaving with anger. The dinner, meant to be a celebration of family, had become a battlefield, and the scars it left would only deepen in the days to come. The McAllister mansion, usually quiet and dignified, was filled with an unsettling stillness on the night of December 24th, 2012. Hours after Randy's dramatic departure, the air seemed heavier, as if the walls themselves held the weight of the evening's tension. The dinner table remained untouched, the partially carved turkey growing cold, and the flickering candles casting eerie shadows across the room. Veronica McAllister, exhausted and emotionally shattered, retreated to the grand dining room. She sank into one of the upholstered chairs at the end of the table, her face streaked with tears. Her shoulders trembled as she silently cried, her head bowed under the crushing weight of her husband's rage and Randy's accusations. Her hands, normally adorned with sparkling rings, were bare and clenched tightly in her lap. For the first time in years, the cracks in her meticulously curated life felt irreparable. In the dim light, Veronica tried to collect herself, but her mind raced with fragmented thoughts. The affair with Randy had given her a brief escape, a glimpse of freedom, but it had also led her here, trapped between a volatile husband and a lover whose impulsive nature was as dangerous as it was intoxicating. She thought of Clara and Elise, her twin daughters, who had witnessed their father's rage earlier that night. Their faces, etched with confusion and fear, haunted her. She wanted to protect them from the truth, but it was too late. The truth had already begun to seep into every corner of their lives, threatening to destroy everything. Unbeknownst to Veronica, Fred McAllister was pacing furiously in his study, just down the hall. His mind was consumed by a storm of anger and humiliation. The image of Randy standing too close to Veronica replayed over and over in his head. His wife's betrayal had cut deeper than he thought possible, igniting a rage he couldn't extinguish. Fred prided himself on control, in his business, his home, and his life. But tonight, control had slipped through his fingers. He felt powerless, something he hadn't experienced in years, and it terrified him. Fred's footsteps echoed through the empty hallways as he left his study and made his way toward the dining room. He found Veronica sitting alone, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the flickering candlelight. The sight of her didn't soften his heart. It only fueled his anger. She was the cause of his humiliation, he thought. The reason their perfect life had been shattered. His rage boiled over as he approached her, and an argument erupted once again. Veronica, though broken, tried to defend herself. Her voice, usually calm and measured, was sharp with emotion. She pleaded with Fred to understand, but her words only deepened the wounds his pride had already suffered. The argument escalated, the tension in the room growing so thick it felt suffocating. Fred's voice rose, filled with anger and betrayal, while Veronica's trembled with desperation. In a moment of blind rage, Fred's eyes fell on the carving knife that still lay on the table. Without thinking, he grabbed it, his grip tight and unrelenting. The light of the candles glinted off the blade as he turned back to Veronica, who froze in shock. In an instant, the unthinkable happened. The knife slashed across her throat, silencing her cries and filling the room with the metallic scent of blood. Veronica collapsed onto the floor, her elegant Christmas sweater now drenched in red. As the reality of what he had done began to sink in, Fred stood motionless, the knife still in his hand. His breath came in shallow gasps, his eyes wide with panic. The woman he had once vowed to love was now lifeless before him, and the weight of his actions pressed down on him like a crushing force. But rather than grieve, Fred's survival instincts took over. He couldn't let anyone know the truth, not his daughters, not the police, and certainly not the world that had come to see him as a powerful, untouchable man. In the hours that followed, Fred meticulously staged the scene. He wiped the knife clean of his fingerprints, though his hands trembled with every movement. He placed Randy's fingerprints on a wine glass that sat near Veronica's lifeless body, planting evidence to frame the man he despised. He adjusted the room to look as if a violent intruder had broken in, creating signs of a struggle that hadn't occurred. When he was satisfied with his work, he called 911, his voice trembling with what sounded like genuine shock and grief. The emergency responders arrived quickly, but the scene they encountered was anything but straightforward. By July 2013, the trial of Randy Jacobs had captured nationwide attention, becoming a symbol of scandal and betrayal. The evidence against him, his abrupt departure from the McAllister home, fingerprints on a wine glass, and his troubled past, seemed overwhelming. Prosecutors argued he had acted in jealousy and rage, murdering Veronica after their heated argument. The courtroom was packed daily with reporters eager to document every detail. Randy's defense team shifted the narrative. A key breakthrough came with the discovery of Veronica's journal, which revealed the depths of her unhappiness in her marriage to Fred McAllister. It chronicled Fred's controlling nature and detailed her affair with Randy, highlighting her growing desire to leave her husband. The journal painted Fred as a man consumed by anger and desperation, casting doubt on his image as a grieving widower. Witnesses testified to Fred's temper and the household tension in the months leading to Veronica's death. As the trial continued, financial records showed Fred's business empire was crumbling under risky investments, furthering the argument that his fear of public humiliation and loss drove him to violence. By the time the jury deliberated, the prosecution's case against Randy had unraveled. He was acquitted due to insufficient evidence, but the verdict left his reputation in ruins, and public opinion remained divided. The investigation took an unexpected turn days after the trial, when forensic technicians revisited the McAllister mansion. In the dining room, a blood-stained handkerchief was found hidden beneath a floorboard. DNA analysis confirmed the blood matched Fred McAllister, implicating him directly in the crime. The shocking discovery led to Fred's dramatic arrest at his corporate office, a moment that made headlines across the nation. Fred claimed innocence, insisting Randy had framed him, but the weight of the evidence was undeniable. Witnesses described Fred as a man driven by rage and fear of losing control. Forensic experts testified that the handkerchief's placement and blood patterns pointed to Fred's involvement during the act itself. His financial struggles and Veronica's desire to leave him painted a clear motive. By October 2013, Fred was convicted of second-degree murder, his fall from power complete. Clara and Elise McAllister, devastated by their parents' tragedy, inherited their mother's fortune, but saw it as a burden rather than a blessing. Unable to face the memories tied to the mansion, they sold it and left Texas to rebuild their lives far from the shadow of their family's collapse. Meanwhile, Randy Jacobs, though acquitted, disappeared from public view, a broken man scarred by the accusations and his entanglement with Veronica. The tragedy of the McAllisters left scars on all involved, its echoes lingering long after the final verdict. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on our daily updates. And check out another shocking case we have covered, the case where a wife exposed her husband's affair at a family reunion. Be sure to check it out and let us know your thoughts in the comments.